welcome everyone. My name is Lauren. My surname is Fraver for anyone interested in how you say that. It's Dutch and it's a bit difficult to say. I am one of the enterprise officers as part of I actually work for the University of Essex. So I do work quite closely with John and Josh and Magda, which you probably have met these guys before. So my role is student facing. So I primarily work with students to help develop their businesses while studying or also once they have graduated. And that's in a varied amount of ways that we do this. It can be business development sessions, events and workshops, sort of specialised boot camps, weekenders, and we also provide opportunities for students to pitch their business ideas. So that they can actually receive funding as well. So we support them all throughout really early idea sort of creation stages through to development, growth, scale, all sorts of things really within the university. And that's why I've been asked to sort of join in on these sessions. Just a little bit about myself as well. I've also had a few different businesses throughout the years, coming from sort of a beauty background and working self-employed throughout that for quite some time, over sort of 11, 12 years. And then I've had all sorts of little bits in between, but most recently I still work in a children's entertainment field. So I do that still alongside my work at the University of Essex and provide entertainment for children at parties and events. And it's just really great fun, and it's great to be able to sort of pass some of my experience and knowledge onto the students that are really interested in starting their own business. So that's my passion and why I got into this and why I've been asked to sort of be part of these sessions, which is great. So really looking forward to the talks we've got today. That's just a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to pass over to Magda.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Magdalena. I'm originally from Germany. My last name though is Arabic because my dad was Arabic. So nice, because you were saying that your husband is Dutch. So there you go. It's like a big mixture of international here. Yeah. I came over to the UK about 10.5 years ago now. Gosh, time has flown by, and I started my business, my first business shortly after, and it was in photography and wedding photographer. Been a wedding photographer and newborn photography as well, which has been a great roller coaster and a steep learning curve in running your own business, but I absolutely loved it. Although after 100 weddings, I just, eased myself out of that again. I've also since then joined forces. Well, I've started working with the university and the Essex startups team about 4.5 years ago. And I love working with the students and mentoring the students, etc. And there I met James, and he's also the entrepreneur in residence at Essex Startups, and we joined forces and co-founded The Weave. The Weave is an enterprise educator business, or in the field for the North Essex region. And we are very much closely working with the university, working with Colby, the enterprise agency of the region, and Essex County Council to deliver certain projects, programs. We're just launching our own membership site with our own programs as well. And yeah, we just wanted to foster really the educational side in the region and facilitate growth in the region as well. So that's, in a nutshell, that's my background. But yeah, we are really excited about today's session because we have the wonderful Eloise Morgan coming along, and Abbie Main and Nada Ibrahim. All three ladies are, I'm really excited for the talks. I personally know Nada from background working with The Weave, so I'm really excited to see her progress as well. But first off, Lauren, if you want to start introducing.
Yes, so yeah, equally as excited. I've not met any of the ladies before, so it's my first time sort of listening to stories and everything, which is fantastic. So just going to do a little introduction for Eloise. So she is joining us today from Paragon Brokers and has over 16 years industry experience working in the financial services sector with specialists in insurance requirements. So I'm sure she's going to talk through this, but some of her main areas of expertise can be anything from professional indemnity, cyber liability, directors and officers liability, and also experience with asset protection and liability. So Also, I've seen that she is part of a number of investment networks as well. So I'm sure Eloise is quite used to doing this sort of thing and talking to people about what you do. And yeah, without further ado, I'll stop going on, but I'll introduce Eloise for our first talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, so first up, probably isn't giving you too much excitement talking about insurance on a Friday lunchtime afternoon. So I'll try and make this as interesting as possible. So I guess, whether you're an investor or you are a business founder, an entrepreneur, you're going to be quite familiar with risk, I would say, and possibly even comfortable with it, because, it comes with the territory of starting a business or investing in one. But by the same token, I'd also guess that you probably put locks on your door at home, but you do still buy house insurance just in case somebody finds their way in or you have a water leak or something. It's basically there for if the worst happens, and it gives you support. And our business insurance should be viewed in the same manner. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people see insurance as just an unnecessary expense, something you just don't really want to sort out because, quite frankly, we've got more important things to be doing, apart from me, obviously, because, it's my job. But it's just going to be my mission for the next 10-15 minutes or so to hopefully show you that rather than being something that you just don't want to think about or leave to the last minute, that insurance is actually a really valuable tool that can help you manage your business risks. It lets you take control of them, helps you transfer them onto somebody else so that you can then focus all your time and attention and money on driving your business forward rather than having to spend cash or worry about things that could have been covered by an insurance policy. So as Lauren kindly gave me a bit of an introduction, I've been working in the industry for 17 years now, which is quite scary. And my background was I started off working with investors themselves, so advising private equity, venture capital firms, and lots of different types of funds, including EIS, SEIS fund managers, about their own insurances. So I'm very au fait with that world. And then it kind of developed into helping those investors make sure that the companies they're investing in, their portfolios, were suitably protected. So that gave me a really good understanding of what they're looking for as investors in their portfolios. So I thought, well, hang on, there's a bit of an advice gap here because a lot of these companies are quite early stage. They don't know who to speak to or what they need. It's all a bit new and scary. So I've spent the last few years working with startups and scale-ups across all different sectors, and just helping get them investor ready from an insurance perspective so that when they go to do their fundraisers and they're being asked to have things in place, they're a little bit more prepared. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you about today. It's really going to be a bit of a fast or lightning talk, as it's headed, about the key insurances that you should think about. And I've tried to sort of do it at each stage. Appreciate there's going to be lots of people here at various different stages and with lots of different types of businesses in mind. So it's kind of as broad as possible. But there will be hopefully time for some questions if I don't witter on for too long afterwards, and then I'll be sticking around, and I'll also leave my contact details in case anyone wants to talk to me at a later date. So without further ado, in this kind of fictional scenario, let's assume that we're all at the start of our journey to world domination and we're incorporating our business. You've registered at Companies House, you're now an officially director, very exciting. But as the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility, and a lot of it. So you're now subject to numerous regulations, legislations. You're going to find yourself under scrutiny from investors, employees, authorities, regulators, customers, all of whom could bring actions against you personally. So these are just some kind of typical examples of where you could find yourself finding, some action brought against you. So it could be, as I say, an investor, a shareholder who blame you personally for their losses as a director. Find yourself the subject of a criminal investigation under fraud. Under GDPR, everyone's favourite topic, apart from insurance, means that directors can be held personally liable for data breaches or other data protection failures. Liquidators who might suspect wrongful trading or incorrect payments to creditors, good old HMRC, where tax payments are sort of potentially misappropriated, and HSE in respect of negligence. So that's all quite scary. But the good news is insurance can use some protection. So directors and officers insurance is financial protection for if you are held to be personally liable and face allegations of a breach of your duty, neglect, misstatement, or just maybe even a simple error. The policies provide cover for the costs that you would incur in helping to defend yourself against these claimants, as well as damages or settlements that might be awarded against you. And this is hugely, hugely important, because even though the company might have a limited financial liability, as a director, you do not. And your personal estate, your personal assets are essentially all up for grabs. So far from covering just directors as well, it's worth noting that policies do normally extend to include sort of senior staff, shadow and non-executive directors, to name a few others. Now, you might not have employed any staff at this point, but if your company is registered with 2 or more directors, then you have to have employer's liability as a legal requirement. And failure to have this in place could result in you being fined up to £2,500 a day by the HSE if you are caught. Now, for many businesses at this point, your value really lies in what makes you different. So it's really important to protect any patents or trademarks, copyrights, any other IP that makes your business unique. Intellectual property insurance covers the costs in you for defending yourselves if somebody alleges that you've infringed on their copyright, and also the costs that you would incur if you feel that somebody has infringed yours, so pursuit coverage. And also, I'll just point out, we are in the process of putting together or finalising a guide for startups and scale-ups, which if anyone's interested, just let me have your details afterwards and I can make sure that we share that with you, and it will be kind of along this basis. So anyway, yes, back to our fictional scenario. So we've incorporated, we've maybe got some staff, we've been really good and taken out all our basic insurances. It's at the fundraising stage now, so we're going to raise some money. All again, very exciting. And this is the point where if you haven't got these insurances sorted out because you've been super busy or you just forgot about it, this is where you're going to really need it, because most investors are going to include insurance as part of their wider due diligence process. Now, requirements do vary between investors, but generally speaking, they're going to insist on you having directors and officers in place, which we've already touched on. That's particularly if they're going to be taking a board or an advisory position, because it gives them some protection as well. And they're also going to typically ask you to have key person insurance in place as well. Not the most cheery topic for a Friday afternoon, so we'll whiz over this, but it's basically life and critical illness insurance, but the company is the beneficiary. So it protects the company. They receive a lump sum if a key person passes away or gets a critical illness diagnosis. And investors will generally insist on this because particularly at startup and scale up stage of a company, that's when you have sort of 1 or 2 key individuals who are really vital in the sort of financial success of that business. So as I say, if you've got these in place already, you'll find that the terms of the fundraise, the investors will probably want to look over what you've got. But quite often the deal can't close until these have been arranged. And I get it all the time where companies come to me last minute saying, oh God, we haven't got our D&O in place. Can we do it? Because we really want to tie up this deal. And it's not the sort of insurance that can necessarily be arranged like that. It does take a bit of time because it's quite a complex underwriting process that sits behind the scenes. So advice is always leave some time to sort that out if you can. Also puts you in a better position to make sure that you're getting the best premium and the best cover, as it gives us more time to go out to market and do those comparisons for you. So now we are operational. Let's move on to what I would say is the most valuable commodity of all that we're all going to hold, and that is data. So some frightening statistics here. This is lifted from a Hiscox report that was done last year. Now, smaller companies are often the target of cybercrime because they're seen as more vulnerable than larger corporations. And you are responsible for all of the data that you collect, regardless of whether you outsource that storage of it. You need to take measures to protect it. As a lot of people say, you know, we store it in the cloud or it's stored at this center, et cetera, doesn't matter, still yours. And as you can imagine, these sort of storage centers are especially targeted by cyber criminals, and they're not impenetrable. AWS, for example, has suffered attacks in the past. So cyber liability insurance can help you manage your cyber risk as well as minimizing the impact of any data breach that you have. And without insurance, you know, the average cost of these breaches is going up and up and up. it could really leave you in quite a tricky position, both financially and, from a reputation perspective, particularly if you are at an earlier stage. Reputation is key, and you don't want to risk losing any customers. So let's talk about what cyber insurance covers. Now, I'm sure we all like to think that we're savvy when it comes to IT these days. We're going to take lots of measures to make sure that our systems are robust and we're as protected as we can. But most security breaches are actually as a result of human error. So unless you're a business which runs with 0 people, there is a chance that a mistake can happen. So think about cyber liability insurance as basically being your 999 emergency response service in the event that you suffer a breach. So you call us an emergency number that's available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and you get through to a cyber breach coach who will essentially triage you, and they will put you onto a panel or an expert, and they'll decide who the right person is for you to speak to at the time. So that could be a lawyer who is going to help you sort of manage how you notify your customers, how you notify the ICO and anyone else who might be impacted. It will pay for IT forensics to come in to kind of establish how did the breach occur, and also help you recover your data and restore your systems. PR, as I kind of touched on, is really critical here. So there's a kind of crisis management experts who will help you manage the message to the press and again to your customers. And also just the general costs involved in notifying all of your clients. And in some cases, if you're required to put people on credit monitoring, for example, the costs in that sort of thing are covered as well. The things that it includes are costs that you might incur if your business has had to kind of shut down effectively following an attack. And I've already kind of mentioned it, ransomware, which is where we see the most claims coming from at the moment. The policies do actually pay if you speak to a ransomware consultant who will kind of talk you through whether they think you should pay. And also, if you do decide to pay the ransom, the insurance will pay that ransom amount. Bit of a tricky area, because obviously a lot of people might argue that's not particularly the right moral thing to do. But if you're in that situation, you're probably not really going to mind too much. You're just going to want your data back. And I think just to prove the point that this is really common now, and organizations that run these criminal activities are serious, they're organized. There's actually a site I found out recently on the dark web, which is kind of like a TripAdvisor for hackers, where basically if they ask you to rate them after you've paid them the money and they've given you your data back. So, effectively they can then use that to say to their next victim, well, look, we've got all these, we've got this rating here to prove that we do actually stay true to our word, and we'll give you our data back. So that's the kind of world we're living in now, which is quite scary. And also you've got the risk of people saying that you were negligent in how that you looked after their data. So they might then want to pursue a legal claim against you, and the cyber policy will pay for the costs in you defending yourself and any damages that might be awarded against you. So really important area of cover, I think there. So I definitely recommend cyber for any business. And then I'm just going to run through just some other types of insurance here that you should consider. Probably do need a little bit more time to go through them properly, but don't worry, we won't go through it all today. So professional indemnity insurance, basically, if you are applying for, if your business activity mean that you need to be regulated by the FCA, sometimes, depending on the permissions you're going for, I'm thinking kind of fintech companies here, you'll be required to have professional indemnity insurance as part of your application. Even if you're not needing to be regulated, if you're giving any sort of advice or providing any sort of service to your clients, then this is basically going to cover you for if you make a mistake, if you're a technology-based company, if there's a problem with the software that then leads to your client suffering a financial loss. This works on, again, similar to what we've already said in terms of defence costs are covered, and also any damages that might be paid out against you. And like anything, mistakes happen. So this kind of there is your backup. Crime insurance. So as you start to take on more and more staff, it becomes a bit more difficult, to monitor them closely. Crime insurance is cover for you for any losses you suffer as a result of employee dishonesty, as well as your losses, perhaps where there is a third-party fraud. So typical things we'd see here would be companies transferring money to hackers, essentially, or criminals as a result of acting on what they believed were sort of legitimate instructions, but were actually fraudulent. and that sort of covers off social engineering as well. So that's becoming, again, quite a big area where we see some claims. Employment practice liability is basically, again, as you start to take on more staff, it covers you for the cost in defending yourself if you find yourself involved in any sort of employee litigation. So things such as defending allegations of unfair dismissal, discrimination, harassment, etc., etc. And then also, if you're at the point where you might have already been there, but say now you're looking to get some office space, you need to get some insurance for any assets that the business owns, so laptops, etc. I appreciate in the environment that most of us work in now, it probably is just going to be laptops and phones and that sort of thing. And if you haven't already got it, employer's liability and your public liability, which is basically just your liability to third parties for if you cause them any injury or property damage. That's sort of all best insured under a package policy, where you can get all of those things under one. Right, so let's say now that you've managed to successfully navigate the rocky landscape of launching a startup, you're operational, and now it's time to go big, we're scaling. So this is the time to really take stock of any insurances that you have in place already, because hopefully you've got something by this point at least, and ensure that you remain protected as you go through this exciting new phase in your journey. And it's at this point that I see a lot of companies who perhaps might have just had an online insurance solution, maybe direct with an insurer. It's probably not going to work for you anymore. So get an independent advisor in who can kind of advise you through the next stages. So I'm going to quickly run through a few things that you should really think about as you continue to grow. So you might be going global at this point, and most insurance policies are going to exclude anything to do with the USA and Canada. Very litigious society, although arguably it's becoming a lot more that way in the UK as well. So insurers get very nervous about that, hence I normally exclude it. So there are some other areas as well where it's a bit of a tricky one for insurers. So just make sure that you check where you're covered in terms of your contracts and your territories. And also, as you start to engage with larger clients and vendors, this is where you're likely going to find them insisting that you have kind of specified limits, and probably on cyber liability and professional indemnity. I'm actually working with a scale up at the moment who's tendering for a project with a very large potential client, which is great. But this particular client, as we tend to see with big corporations, is asking them to have some very high limits on their insurance, £10 million. Which is not uncommon. Unfortunately, the insurance market it's been through a bit of a tricky place. That's a conversation for another time. But essentially, it means that getting to a limit of 10 million is quite tricky. We need to get lots of different insurers involved in that placement, because most insurers will only offer sort of 2 million as their maximum amount. And they need this cover kind of yesterday to go for this contract. So we're working on it, but the more time you can give to think about these things in advance, the better, because it's not necessarily just an overnight solution. And insurance kind of, I guess, has a bit of a reputation for being very quick to take your money and not so quick to pay back out and help you. I'm pleased to say, in my experience, that's not the case. But this is where it pays to have a broker, so they can kind of talk you through and make sure you're not signed up to a policy where there's all these horrible conditions. But nevertheless, every single insurance contract works on the basis of utmost good faith, which means that you need to declare all material facts to insurers. And a material fact is basically something that's going to influence the premium, the terms, and whether an insurer is going to take you on as a client. So just some examples here of some sort of, I guess, issues that might crop up for a company that's scaling. So you might have massively increased your revenue, you might be going to different territories, you might have a lot more staff, etc., etc. All I would say is, if in doubt, just declare it. It might lead to some further questioning from an insurer, but if you don't, you could breach a policy condition, which means that you're then not covered when you need it. So it's always better just to get advice. And again, if you're using a broker, quite often I'll speak to my clients and they'll call me and say, look, do we need to talk to insurers about this? And probably half the time, no, we can help them manage that, but it's always better to make sure. And then look, the ultimate end game for a lot of companies is going to be sailing off into the sunset in 5 to 10 years time with our millions that we've made from our big successful global business. Might be some way off at the moment. But at this point, there's also insurance that you can get to help you minimise your liability on exit, which offer protection for representations, indemnities, tax liabilities, etc., etc. So it kind of really can help you through cradle to grave in terms of your business. And it's going to depend, and I've kind of given a bit of a timeline here, but it really does depend on your own individual business. So it's always better to kind of sit down with someone that can talk you through where they see your risks as being, and build you a sort of program that works as and when you need it. So yes, sorry, I appreciate I've really flown through that. Bit of a crash course in insurance there. As I say, we're producing a guide at the moment that kind of covers that all off in a little bit more detail, with a glossary of kind of what they all mean. So happy to take any questions if we've got the time, and if not, to talk later on. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Eloise.
Thank you.
That was really good.
Thanks.
Very scary, but very good.
I don't mean
It's
to
really
be scary.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting just to find out about all of that, because I think we all know sort of the basics, don't we? But then when you delve into it a little bit more like that, I think it's really interesting to know what to need when you've got that startup.
About patent and IP insurance?
Yes. Well, it's going to sound like a really flaky insurance answer if it really does depend. It's minimum premiums, really, just in general, in terms of that sort of thing. You're looking at thousands a year rather than hundreds of pounds. But depending on what stage you're at, so how far you've got with actually your copyright, your patents, you know, if they're actually filed, and etc., it will reduce the risk and therefore reduce the premium. And also it depends if you want to go for just pursuit coverage, if you want to have cover for if you're going to go after someone, or if you just want that defense coverage. You don't have to have both. You can kind of pick and choose if you want to keep your costs down. But yeah, I would say, unfortunately, it's not going to be something that's a few £100s a year. For that sort of insurance, you're probably looking at sort of low thousands.
I think Laura just also came back on saying filing in May, international and defense.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it probably that can keep it at the lower end. So yeah, Laura, happy to sort of have a chat with you later on. We can set up a call and talk through what's needed. It's quite a straightforward process to actually get a quote on that one. It's usually a proposal form where they ask you certain things. Yeah, unfortunately, insurance is still a little bit archaic for some of these where you need proposal forms, but they're generally quite straightforward.
Thank you so much, Eloise. That was really informational and very, such important topics, even though it's always like finance, insurance and legal are all the things that people don't like to think about, but they're so crucial. So yeah,
and I'll just add to that, so when we talk about cost, just to, if you want to just have a chat, like even if we get to quote stage, there is no charge for that whatsoever. So the only time that we would ever charge is if you actually then buy a policy through us. So even if it gets to the stage we just want to explore your options, work out how much they're going to cost, you can absolutely do that, and there is no charge whatsoever.
Brilliant.
Great, thank you.
Good to know.
Okay, so yeah, we'll move on to our next speaker then, which is Abbie Main. Thank you for joining us. I've just got a short introduction for Abbie as well. So Abbie's joining us as the funding team manager at Seed Legals. So she looks after a team of funding strategists and help founders to raise investment. So she does understand investment goals, timelines, investment strategy, and how to raise investment quickly. So she's got a lot of experience as well with working with startups. So I will pass over to Abbie for her to give her lightning talk to us.
Super excited to be here. So thanks so much for inviting me. I'm excited to see as well that there are some names that I recognise from using Seed Legals. So nice to see you, and I apologise if you've ever heard me speak about fundraising before, because potentially you've heard some of this before. So in terms of what I wanted to kind of run through, it's very much going to be a whistle-stop tour of the fundraising landscape, but essentially giving you as founders an idea of how you can get investment ready. So the reason that this is actually a really, really important topic, particularly at the moment, is because the end of the tax year is looming. So 5th of April marks the end of the tax year, which means Q1 is the most exciting and most active time in the fundraising calendar. So what you'll find is you'll have, and there's probably investors on this call who find themselves in this situation, but you'll find that investors might have some leftover SEIS or EIS allowance from a previous tax year, and they might want to be actively looking to invest in startups that can offer them that SEIS and EIS relief, but they need to get their shares issued before 5th of April. So that literally creates like the perfect fundraising economy for founders, because you've got investors who are actively looking to invest in businesses, but also they've got more urgency to move because of that 5th of April deadline. So a good time to be thinking about getting investment ready, or a good time if you are raising investment at the moment to start getting things kind of prepared and set up to do so. So obviously, really nice to meet all of you. I've had a brief introduction, so I won't reintroduce myself. But what I will kind of emphasize is that my job, I think probably much like Eloise's, is to kind of convince you as founders that the legal documentation, though probably not the most glamorous thing in the world, is something that shouldn't be seen as admin. It shouldn't be seen as something that, look, we'll do it when we get to it. But actually, it should be used as this strategic tool to be able to stand out to investors and show investors that you're the type of founder they'll want to work with. So I work at Seed Legals. For anyone that doesn't know, we're essentially a company, legal tech platform designed to be the one-stop shop for everything that you'll need as a founder when you're kind of setting up the company, getting the foundational documents in place, your employment contracts, founder agreements, and things like that. But then we help you right through the fundraising process. So all of the legals, the support, and the data to help you navigate that process. And then everything you'll need afterwards as well in terms of scaling. So if you're hiring employees and trying to retain them, you might want to be thinking about employment option schemes. So we've got all of that in one place, and designed to be a lot simpler, a lot more time effective, and a lot more cost effective than going and using a law firm and paying all of their billable hours. So to start, the fundamentals of raising, every founder that I speak to, I kind of try and break it down into kind of three main stages. So the first thing that you want to be thinking about when you're looking at getting investment ready is preparation. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. As I just mentioned, if you're looking to speak to investors, imagine that they're probably inundated every single week with pitch decks, with email requests, with meeting requests. You need to be a founder that's standing out and putting your best foot forward to impress them from the very beginning of those conversations, particularly if we're looking at early stage investment, where so much of that is about the relationships that you can build with those investors, the impression that you can set, because you don't necessarily have tangible metrics like revenue multipliers and traction and customers. It's about building that rapport and showing investors that you've got your operations run like a military operation. So definitely something to be thinking about. You'll then also want to be looking at maximizing timelines. So there's a really shocking statistic from Bohurst that fundraising can take up to 18 months, which is repulsive, because as founders, you should be spending that time spent on your business, actively growing things, scaling things, building things, thinking about your marketing and your sales. You shouldn't be kind of sinking all of that time and energy into the process of fundraising. So there's ways that you can navigate the process to bring things forward, to run things in parallel, and make sure that you can run those campaigns as succinctly as possible. And then also looking at closing with competence. So just making sure that you've got everything that you need in place. Sounds like insurance is probably one of the things on there, but making sure also that all of your legal documentation, all of your corporate governance has been ticked off, so that you don't come back in a few, if you're looking to get your advanced, your SCIS compliance or something, that HMRC can't come back and say, well, you're missing X, Y, Z. It's just ticking everything off and keeping it neat. So on that preparation side, I've kind of highlighted some of the key things that you'll want to be thinking about. I've added insurance in because it sounds like something to have on your agenda from the beginning. But from that legal perspective, it's also thinking about the documents that your investors are going to want to see. So if you're entertaining an investor conversation, they're going to want to see your cap table and your company's house filings to match. So due diligence, obviously you want to set the right impression. You want to show that from the beginning, you've set things up correctly. You've not cut any corners. So what this means is if you've incorporated with 1 share or 100 shares, you've taken the time to do a share split to break that out into more like 1 million shares. The reason for that is because if you only have 1 share in the company, the minute you take on investment, you're going to be giving away 50% if you create 1 more share. So thinking about those sorts of things sends the right signals to your investors. You also want to be thinking about if you're a solo founder, but you're bringing on board a co-founder, that you've transferred shares or issued shares up front. You don't want to send a share register over to your investors only to say, but actually we're also going to be bringing on board XYZ person in the next couple of weeks. You want to have those sorts of things squared off from the beginning to, again, just show that you've thought about those operations. You also then want to be thinking about protective measures for investors. So things like founders agreements and IP assignments are really just important documents to show to your investors that you've thought through what they're going to be looking for and what they're interested in. So on the founders agreement side, That's basically going to spell out the roles and responsibilities between founders, but also what they owe to the company. So you're looking at what would happen in the event that someone leaves the company. Do they keep all of their shares, or actually does some of that go back to the business? These are really important things for investors to be able to see up front. And you're also going to be looking at IP assignments. So this is essentially saying that the company owns the IP, so that you can't have someone who's worked on the software claim one day that they own it and walk away with it, again, leaving the business uninvestable. So thinking about those sorts of protective measures, it's important to give the right message to your investors. And then finally, we've got SEIS, Advance Assurance, and Timesheet, which, given the end of the tax year, these are two of the most important documents that you should have on your radar. So SEIS, Advance Assurance, SEIS and EIS, essentially the tax relief schemes that you can claim 50% as an investor, or 30% through EIS as an investor back of what you've invested in a business. Advance Assurance is essentially HMRC giving you a tick to say, yep, you're likely to be eligible for that. And if you're trying to raise at the moment, or probably at most points of the year, but particularly at the moment, that's something that your investors will probably expect to see before they transfer funds over to you. It's not a requirement, it's not an obligation to have it. You can still get SEIS and EIS without it, but the chances of having an angel investor that would want to part with cash before actually seeing that accreditation is quite unlikely. So something that's good to have at the start, so that you don't delay the process later, but also so that you're actively attracting those types of investors. And then there is the term sheet, which is my single favorite thing to talk about. So the term sheet is essentially a non-legally binding document that's going to take all of the most important terms you could speak to your investors about and put them in one place. The reason this is so important as a document to have set up before you start speaking to investors is because, one, it prepares you for thinking about what you're actually asking those investors for. As you go through this document, you'll be thinking about things like, what's my valuation? Do I want people on my board? Do I want to give any investor consent rights? Asking yourself those questions as founders is important, because it's going to help you to decide what types of investors you should even be speaking to. If you're going through that and thinking, right, I've got a sky high valuation, but I don't want to give any board rights, don't want to give any investor consent, you're probably not going to be having any conversations with VCs. So it helps to kind of ground you in the investor landscape and position you with who you should be speaking to. But then it also means that if you go into those investor conversations, you can close that conversation and say, let me send you my pitch deck, let me send you a term sheet, and automatically that's going to kickstart the next steps. You're not going to have this painful 2-week period where I thought the meeting went well, but nothing's really happened off the back of it. You're taking ownership of those conversations and you're pushing conversations forward to signatures. So it's a really, really important documentation from that perspective. And the final reason, and if I have any investors on the call, I hope that you would agree with this, but if you have a term sheet, as a founder, one, it obviously stands out as an impressive thing and will set you apart from others. But secondly, it also gives the impression that you're probably speaking to other investors. So you'll create this kind of time urgency, which means that as a founder, you won't have this difficult period where investors are really, really busy people and you're not hearing responses. If the assumption is you're speaking to other investors, things tend to move much more quickly. And we also see that if you get one signature on that term sheet, you're 67% more likely to secure subsequent signatures. So really, really important document, and something that I put in front of every single founder that I speak to. So just to give you a bit of an insight into what that term sheet looks like, if you are going through negotiations at the moment, the term sheet is designed to basically allow you to negotiate the most important things. So it's essentially a balance between economics and control. The reason it's good is because it takes all of the most important things out. You're not negotiating on a 200-page shareholders agreement. You're taking it out, making it much more concise, so that then you and your investors can negotiate over a much quicker time period. So the point of this is not to then spend weeks and weeks or months and months negotiating over terms, but actually to make sure that you and your investors end on reasonable terms either way, with that crucial balance between economics and control. Valuation is one of the most important things that comes up through that process. As a founder, it's so difficult to be able to decide how you value something that is literally your project, your baby, something that you've thought of from the beginning. How can you apply a value to that? Something that can be really, really important to think about is the fact that as an industry standard, and our data at Seed Legal shows pretty much the same thing, 15% equity is the average given away in early stage funding rounds. And that's not plucked out of thin air. That's basically the perfect balance between not giving away too much equity early on, so you can go on to raise multiple rounds afterwards, but also gives investors enough of the piece of the pie that they're reassured for their early stage investment and likely to get good returns on what they've invested. So that 15% is a good guiding principle. If you find you're having to give away much past the 20%, either you're looking to raise too much too soon, or you're speaking to investors who are potentially expecting too much. So you want to start reconsidering, maybe we raise less at this point and come back to that later. So the next thing is thinking about maximizing your timelines. So as I say, this is important just in terms of keeping that investor momentum going and also saving yourselves precious time as founders. But also it's important right now if you are raising because of the end of the tax year deadline. So in terms of what you can do, that term sheet, as I say, it saves you weeks of kind of waiting and fizzling, so proactive discussions. But you can also run that in parallel with the advance assurance process, which can take 45 days with HMRC. So if you run those two things at the same time, rather than one after the other, you're already shaving a month off of your fundraising timeline. But also you can start thinking about agile fundraising. So rather than raising all in one chunk and thinking, right, I'm out here to raise £500,000 and having to herd cats and get all of your investors in one term on one term sheet, you can think about applying different ways of working with different investors. So agile fundraising is essentially the method of breaking that big funding round into lots of smaller chunks. So let's say I'm raising £500,000 and I have one angel investor who's got £20,000 ready to be invested now. And then I have a big ticket VC, £300,000 that's probably going to take a few months. I could look at using something like an advanced subscription agreement to take that £20,000 from an angel investor straight away, be able to start using the cash, be able to start making an impact on my business, and also consider putting up my valuation in the meantime. You might think, why on earth would an investor do that? You would obviously reward them with something like a discount on the price per share to ensure that they're getting favourable terms. But that then means you get to the chunk of your seed round, potentially you get 300,000 and you've got £100,000 that you're still looking to close. You can choose to close your funding round early and then use something called instant investment afterwards to top that up on an investor by investor basis. So what this means is you're not forced to having to get everyone into the same place, but actually you can move in accordance with when those conversations happen and keep boosting your valuation as you go, so you end up giving away less equity in the long run. And then the final thing, as I say, is just to make sure that you kind of close the round in a compliant way and have everything lined up that you should have lined up. So Shareholders Agreement is the legally binding document. The way this works on Seed Legals is we'll take your term sheet, and once it's been signed, in a click, we will create a corresponding Shareholders Agreement and Articles of Association so that you can get those legally binding signatures and also update your company's house appropriately. We'll also give you a board and shareholder resolutions. So this is basically a piece of corporate governance that current shareholders and current board directors sign off to say, yes, we're happy to approve that this funding round goes ahead. We're happy with the creation of new shares. We're happy to create a new shareholders agreement. And essentially, as I say, it's corporate governance to say that, yes, we've kind of finalized this and made these decisions formally. And then the final thing is creating your SHO1, sending it over to Companies House and actually making those shares exist and giving your investors their share certificates. So again, if you are looking at raising before the end of the tax year, that SHO1 needs to be filed at Companies House before April 5th in order for your investors to be able to claim that tax relief. And that is everything from my side. As I said, whistle stop tour.
I don't think it was a whistle stop tour. I think it was really involved and there was loads there. I thought it was amazing just to hear all of that, really, and just quite in depth. So fantastic. Thank you for that.
I think it was also really great to hear, you know, like how to start from startup and all those legal documents, but then also how the fund, like what you have to be in place to be an investable business in the first place, and then how you kind of progress through the stages. So I thought that was really interesting. We have a question from Jess. Any comments on self-funding?
As in bootstrapping the whole journey? So our founder, Sealy, was actually posted about this the other day, where obviously as a business, we help people with that fundraising process. But actually as a business, if you can start and scale without having to go through that fundraising process, then that's incredible. So if you are in a position where you can self-fund and you can get yourself to scaling point without raising investment, then you're keeping more equity to yourself, you're keeping your cap table clean. So yeah, 100%, that keeps things simpler and more straightforward. But I think the balance is probably, if you were looking at self-funding, it might happen over 5 years, 10 years, whereas if you funded, you could get there in 2, 3. It's probably weighing up the pros and cons of that, particularly if you're in a competitive industry where maybe other people are racing to scale.
I think Laura says she's on the trial basis on the platform already. Looks really great, but can you get specific advice during the trial, or do you have to be a paying member?
So you can get advice either way. So if you've got questions about like the documentation, we have we use intercom, like a blue chat icon, and people get back to you in 5 to 10 minutes. So we have weekend teams there as well. So yeah, they're for support. And then if you're looking to speak on like an individual product, so if that's options, if that's fundraising, we have teams that are more than happy to have conversations with you and put you on the right tracks.
But now, without further ado, I'm really happy to see Nada coming on today and have our little founders talk as the next sort of chat, just because I've come to know Nada in 2021. I've met her at one of our programs. So we've delivered an accelerator program for Colby, and there was Nada on the board of participants, and it was just great to see you grow, to meet you obviously, and have these, I think we did it every 2 weeks at that point. So it was kind of spread out over 3 months, and to really work with you and see how you come and flourished throughout. And then at the end, you actually pitched in front of John, which was really great to see. And then, coming on today and just have a little bit of a founders talk, because I think it's always great to also bring in in this network to also share some journeys and personal journeys and startup journeys. So Nada, you are obviously you're a graphic designer, I think by trade, a freelance, working very passionately, and have been working for lots of big brands and big companies. But you've then started to set up your own business, which is Buha Gifts, if that I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I will let you obviously talk more about that and your journey. But so yeah, over to you, Nada.
Thank you so much, Magda. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you guys for this great opportunity. And before I start, I'm going to say that what I'm going to share is very personal experience about myself, about my journey, and about my business. And allow me to share it with you, because I believe maybe there is someone of you gone through something similar, and I hope that this will give you some insights. So no presentation, no slides, no numbers, analytics, nothing, just simple talk from the heart, paper. So let me tell you first a little bit about myself. My name is Nada Ibrahim. I am the founder of the brand Buhar, for authentic and culture-related gifts and prints. I wasn't always an entrepreneur. In fact, until very recently, I knew nothing about business. I studied art and design for 5 years and worked as a graphic designer and freelancer for over 15 years in Cairo, Dubai, and London. But recently, I had a turning point in my life, and I thought about changing my career and starting my own business. And this is when my brand Buhar was born. So for me, my brand is not just a business, but it's also a very personal experience. It says so much about me and about my culture. I came from a small island by the river Nile, and it's very mixed culture area. It's located at the crossroads between Africa and the Middle East, and has perhaps the oldest and the richest cultural history in the whole world. So I had this idea about creating a brand of handmade gifts inspired by this rich culture and personalized and tailored to the needs of my customers. And I chose the name Buhar because it says everything I want to reflect about my experience and about my business. It's diverse, colorful, warm, and it's rich in flavor. So when I first started my business, I was so passionate about it. I was full of hope and inspiration and expectations. And but I was also very anxious because I knew nothing about running my own business. I knew nothing about social media marketing. I was also so stressed about competition because competition online is indeed scary, especially the online gifts market. So I prepared myself. I did my homework, researched online, took courses, watched tons of videos and tutorials to improve my skills and increase my business and marketing knowledge. I learned how to make perfect listings, take catchy photos, earn customers' trust, and distinguish myself from the crowd. Not very long after opening my shop, the orders became more regular and the sales started to do well. But just then, I was hit by my biggest business obstacle. And to my surprise, the biggest challenge I faced in my first year of business was not inefficient marketing strategies, not search engine optimization, not social media, and not even competition, but it was me. Yes, my own self was my biggest problem. Because the minute that my orders started to rise up and my product started to get more attention, and instead of being over the moon and celebrating my own success, I felt intimidated, withdrawn, and out of passion. I had no energy to do anything. I started taking more breaks and I put all my business plans on hold. I distracted myself with other unrelated activities and hobbies, and I did very, very little work. And at some point, I was even praying not to get any more orders. In the beginning, I thought I was just exhausted, but no matter how much rest I took, the situation got only worse. And with time, depression hit hard. I even stopped doing the daily activities like cooking, cleaning, and going out. So I needed to sit with myself and ask myself, what is going on here? I wanted an explanation because I was supposed to be happy and thriving, but here I was curled up on my sofa, scrolling through my social media timeline with no purpose. So after taking a mental health course, reading some books, watching many YouTube videos, having few sessions of coaching, and a lot of self-reflecting, I started to understand what's happening to me. And I made a fascinating discovery. I realized that starting your own business is so much like being in a long-term relationship. It extracts our top qualities, but at the same time mirrors back to us our deepest, vulnerable insecurities. So basically, the reason why I was depressed and unmotivated was not because I was tired, not because I was lazy or out of passion, but because I was simply scared. But why I was scared and what was I scared of? What is so scary about my dream coming true? To answer these questions, let me tell you more about fear. Fear is one of the most basic human emotions. It is programmed into our nervous system, and it works like a survival instinct that helps protect us when we sense danger or feel unsafe. Feeling afraid is very natural, and it's even helpful in some situations, like if we are caught in a fire or being attacked. But fear can also take effect when we are faced with non-dangerous events like exams, public speaking, a new job, or even a party. It's a natural response to a threat that can be either perceived or real. For some people, when they become overwhelmed by fear, They want to avoid situations that might make them frightened or anxious. When something seems too challenging or involves learning new skills, people may simply give up or refuse to get involved, and failing can trigger feelings of worthlessness. So avoiding trying in the first place can sometimes serve as a way to protect the self from disappointment, regret, and sadness. So in my case, I was scared of failing and scared of succeeding, but not be able to handle success. I was also scared of not being good enough and scared of being judged by others. I was avoiding doing something that seems too challenging because deep down inside, I thought that I don't have the abilities or the skills to do it. I was saving myself the pain, shame, humiliation, and feeling of worthlessness by self-sabotaging my own business. Sure enough, by doing that, I end up feeling shameful, humiliated, and a failure, which feeds my original beliefs about myself. And it turned into a vicious, self-defeating cycle. So my inner demons surrounded me and I got stuck. And I knew at that point that I had to deal with them before I go another step. In other words, I had to work on myself more than working on my skills. And I had to conquer my own fear before I conquer competition. But how? How to stop procrastinating and get passion back? How to change beliefs that have been in the subconscious for so long? So if anyone here struggling with these questions, behaviors, or emotions, let me share with you some insights. Researchers say procrastination or giving up is used as a way to cope with negative feelings and emotions. It's fear of failure, low self-confidence, and pleasure-seeking are few reasons why people engage in this behavior. So when you tell a procrastinator, just do it, that will never fix the problem. It's just like asking an obese person to avoid overeating, or saying to a depressed person, just get over it. It can be hard to break this cycle, but there are 3 simple tips. Those who study the subject say that it can actually help. Acknowledgement, forgiveness, and action. So step 1, acknowledgement. To acknowledge is to review your behavior patterns and try to understand truly what's driving it. To identify beliefs and assumptions that is keeping you stuck. What beliefs do you hold about yourself and your abilities? Do you tell yourself that you never complete things? Do you think that you are not smart enough, talented enough, lovable enough? Are you feeling vulnerable about something like failing or being judged? What do you really fear? So awareness is your first step. Step 2, forgiveness. Researchers say self-compassion actually works because it makes you feel good about yourself. Forgiving oneself can reduce the guilt, which is one of the main triggers of procrastinating and avoiding in the first place. When we accept our flaws and embrace the fact that we are all humans and we will make mistakes and we will struggle and we are learning, then we can be kind to ourselves even if we fail. Step 3, action. Rather than telling yourself, just do it, which can be sometimes overwhelming, say, just get started. Ignore how you feel and focus instead on what the next action should be. Break down tasks into easily accomplished steps. Even completing a tiny action will help you make progress and feel better about the task and about yourself. This will increase your self-esteem and gives you a boost to make another small step. This simple swap shifts your attention from your emotions to your actions. So the next time you find yourself watching Netflix and instead of working on your business plans, just try to apply these 3 simple steps. Notice your thoughts and emotions, be kind to yourself, and take a small action. See, self-improvement is a journey. I'm still on my journey. I'm still learning, still growing, but change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes time to change. But having your own business is a great opportunity to work on yourself. And all the challenges that we face along the way are great chances to grow. Remember that we have to believe in ourselves, and also remember what Winston Churchill once said, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Nada, for sharing that. I mean, that's obviously a very vulnerable journey to share as a first step. So thank you so much for that.
I did it to be brave, to put myself in the brave state.
Yeah, and I think I'm just speaking myself from a business owner, and I think everybody probably has some kind of yes moment in your talk, because very much so. I think everybody can relate to a certain degree, or even to a very, very big degree, and things outside, sometimes out of our control, like put us in that slide. And then you, like you said, having those fears and identifying those fears. Is the first step, is really the first step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nada. I think, like a few people have said, thank you so much, and inspirational. And I think it is, isn't it? It is the same thing. I think we've all been there at some point, no matter how big or how small you do have to sort of think about it in the way you said it, and the confidence building and that side of things. And it's tricky when you're starting a business. There's so many different aspects, isn't it? And the self-belief is a huge part of it.
Given you deal with so many investors and startups, do you run any event where we can meet each other? And then Laura kind of jumped onto that great question, Jill. When you raise the service for fundraising, the slides say you have over 10,000 investors. Do most people find investment within the network or outside? How long does the process tend to last through to a successful round? If I was reaching out to investors outside of the platform, do you still get the same service support?
So I guess to Jill, yes, we do. We're actually planning one for end of Feb, early March. So if you sign up to Seed Legal's newsletter, I think they shared details of it via that. But yeah, we're looking at doing kind of a speed dating investor founder networking event. And then in terms of so to be super clear, so Seed Legals, we do the legal documentation and all of the support for it. So essentially people come to us to execute the documentation, get support with negotiations and things like that. We're not actually able to do investor introductions because we're not FCA regulated to do so. So the 10,000 investors is 10,000 investors that actively use our platform. So they sign the documentation or they send investment proposals through it. But at the moment, we're not like an active marketplace. I wish we were. It's one of the biggest things that I think we could do to help. But yeah, it's not something we're FCA regulated to do yet. But we do support. So yeah, if for example, contacts within the business were aware that a business matched the interest of an investor we work with closely, then we'd say, can we share your pitch deck? And then the investor can make the decision whether they'd like to reach out. But that's kind of more ad hoc rather than it being a service. But yeah, we support people with all of their investors, whether they were found outside via Angel Investment Network, anything like that as well.
I love, Nada, all the responses for your talk as well. And John's response, well done, Nada, nailed it. So love that. Absolutely.
Is there a network one can join to be able to connect with other founders, potential founders? So we have our Slack channel,
which I have in the next slide. So
okay, that's coming up. So that is for the FE group in particular. So with all the members, if you want to join that, Magda will share. That's just for us. I don't know if others have got other groups that they also connect with, then please do share. And obviously you can connect with each other via LinkedIn as well, also great.
It's a great place to just see everybody in one room, so to speak. And if there are any other further questions, you can also pop stuff in there. If you have any kind of events going on or something that you'd like to share with the community, please feel free to do so. But also, like I said, ask questions. Excellent. But yeah, so upcoming events, we have obviously there's the University Enterprise Zone. So John and Josh are organizing lots of events always. So these are the next ones. On the 25th of January, we have Backing Essex Business, Getting Investment Ready. On the 15th of Feb is Market Sizing with PwC Raise. And then on the 22nd of Feb, again, Backing Essex Business, but preparing a business idea and good ideas. What? Oh, making good ideas. Sorry,
great.
Making good ideas. Great. I was like, that does not make sense. And then obviously on the 25th, we have the next FE. So with Emma Blaylock and Julie Pauly. So excited for that one as well.
I just want to say thank you to everyone that's joined us today. It's really great to see so many of you here. And thank you, to all three of our wonderful speakers. Really great insights, information, inspirational, all of it. I think they were all three of them were fantastic. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's talking about insurance and legal side of things, like we said, it's not the most sexy topics, but the most crucial ones. And I think it's good to start the year off with that. So thank you so much for your talks also, Eloise and Abbie, on that, because it's such an important band, but then also, and then thank you Nada for sharing and be inspirational, because I think everybody can relate to those moments, and it's great to see you on the other side, where you have those insights, and it's always just to see what steps you kind of develop for yourselves, and that was very inspirational. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
That's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining. We hope to see you again in February on the 25th. So watch the space, sign up, and come along for another sort of lunchtime talk on a Friday.